This episode is sponsored by Team Builder, yet another company that's doing great things for the first responder community. As a strength and conditioning coach myself who also trains tactical athletes, dissemination of wellness information is one of the biggest challenges. Now, Team Builder is the premier strength and conditioning software for tactical athletes, and there are several features that really impress me. Firstly, there is a full exercise library, so you, the personal trainer, does not have to create that within your own department. Secondly, you can send out programming, but also individualize, which I love. So you blanket program for everyone. Now you can tweak based on someone's injury, someone's need to maybe drop some body composition, rather than having to write a program for every single person on their own. Team Builder also allows you to build custom questionnaires to collate health and wellness data. It integrates with wearables. And I think one of the most important things is obviously it tracks. To me, it's imperative that we as a profession start tracking our people from day one and then over the full span of their career, therefore catching potential wellness issues and injuries before they happen. Now, if you want to try Team Builder, they are offering you, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, a free 14-day trial to experience all of the features. And if you want to take a deeper dive into Team Builder, listen to episode 1032 with Melissa Mercado, or go to teambuilder.com. And I'll spell that to you because it's not as you'd think, teambuildr.com. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show my friend and stuntman, John Reynolds. Now, in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from John's early life in New Zealand, working as a club bouncer, his journey into the stunt world, working with Captain Dale Dye, the Pacific, the shift in his perspective on masculinity, etherial beings, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of almost 1,100 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you John Reynolds. Enjoy. Well, John, I want to start by saying we had the most hilarious pre-recording incident. Something happened between the technology where you sounded like Marvin the Chipmunk and we couldn't figure out how the hell we were going to undo it. So that was the prequel to this conversation. But I want to welcome you to the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Yeah, really excited to be here. And thank you for having me.
Like I said, you have a very deep voice. So when I first heard you talk, it was quite shocking. All right. Well, the very first question, where on planet Earth are we finding you today?
So I am in Cooper's Plains in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia.
Brilliant. Well, I know that's not where you were born. So let's start at the very beginning of your timeline. Tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
So I was born in Wellington in New Zealand. So I'm an immigrant to Australia. And I had an older sister, 18 months older than I was, and mum was a registered nurse, and dad at that stage was an accountant. He'd done some military stuff. So both parents were service agents. It's interesting when you look at those uplinks about what your parents did. There's often a trickle down effect into what we look at and role model from that. So I've always wanted to give back and be a people person. Growing up, dad and my mum separated when I was nearly 5, which had a direct impact on me. I was a very, very sensitive child. So having no dad in the picture and him not being around really affected that dynamic and about wanting to be, who was I and what was my role and all of that. Having an older sister and a mum, then I was brought up with all the ideals of being a positive man for feminine interests and looking after the women and putting the toilet seat down. And so I got all of those indoctrinations of making sure that I was a good man for women, but I really didn't know what I was doing in terms of being a good male. I felt very sensitive. I had this very strong, over-analytical mind, which I've recently learned to come to terms with, which works for me now. But before then, I had a lot of struggle with over-analysis, with worry, with anxiety, and it was always wanting to find, what I was doing, what's my purpose, why am I here?
When I think back to all the conversations in the T2 green room, we'll obviously get to where you and I work together. I always think about hearing the term the ochre man, which I'm assuming is kind of, again, the Australian version of the manly man, the Crocodile Dundee. With you having this upbringing where you are tapped into, the compassionate side, were there any kind of internal struggles of what you were seeing masculinity being presented as and how you were living in your household?
Yeah, I was definitely affected by the role modeling. So, back in my heroes growing up was Tarzan and the $6 Million Man was Lee Majors. And I just thought, wow, I wanted to change my name, call me Steve. John wasn't a great name. There were too many Johns around in the 70s and the 80s. So this idea about it, if I could be that, if I could find those virtues or have those standards in my life, it would be much better, because then I wouldn't feel so vulnerable. I wouldn't feel so weak, and looking for these virtues of what a man was. And I wished that my dad was there to come to my sporting games, to stand beside me, guide me, have all these incredible kind of the strengths that I knew that if somebody was teaching me and guiding me, I would be better off. And so over the years, I just kept looking into the role modelings. Didn't meet my heroes, obviously, but they gave me a blueprint of which now I realize that it was probably good that I didn't have a father around, because he might have interfered or changed some of those, and they wouldn't meet the standards that I had for myself. So, yeah, being in New Zealand, very, very small population and very, very family orientated. We'd moved to the top of the South Island, a place called Nelson, which only had 50,000 people there. And I can kind of remember those years more than the earlier years from sort of 7 onwards. And sport was there for me. I was a soccer player back then, and I loved soccer because I could run around and be aggressive and all the things that I could do on the sporting arena, I couldn't do in my other life. So there was this sort of other part of me that would come out, this aggression, this competitiveness, this drive to I could make a difference in that area.
It's interesting the number of people that, they haven't had a parent, a certain, one or the other in their life. More often with the men, we're talking about the dad. And, that's the thing. It's like, yeah, they weren't there at the sporting place. The times where I wish they were there, the music concert, the sporting event. And my dad was in our life, but he was never any of those. So it's interesting. I mean, you can even have a parent present physically that aren't really present, from an emotional point of view. And there's still, again, I think the same that I hear from a lot of people that the parent has left, that feeling of why was I not good enough? And I see it in my siblings too, like trying to still get their attention, even though now they're in their 40s. There's still that element of trying to get dad's attention at that point.
Yeah, that not being good enough, I mean, is still there today. I mean, that's still part of my mental health that I work with, and I was probably born with it. I see a lot of people that's either not being good enough, seeking approval, that validation. Going into the stunt industry and the film industry was all about seeking validation, that approval, that somehow, hey, well done, you're enough. But it's very fleeting, because it's a constant addictive experience of that dopamine hit. Whereas now I can support myself, go through some little rituals, and hey, I'm back in an alignment. But it's there, and I'm aware I play with that experience every day.
You were playing soccer or football through the school age. When did you start lifting weights?
Through I was about 15, and we'd moved around 12 or 13. My mum had sort of had enough. I got into trouble. I was breaking the law. I became a very good entrepreneur on the other side of things. And at 12, I was up to no good, and we were doing things which I think, hey, that's not a bad mindset to have at 12 when you're actually making money from doing criminal activities. It's a little entrepreneurial thing. At least I've managed to flip the paradigm and do my work for good instead of corruption. But Mum was like, "Well, hey, this is not going to work. I need to get out of this sort of sleepy hollow." And she migrated. We got to Brisbane in Australia in 1984 and started high school there. And one of ended up coming one of my friends. At the time, we were kind of rivals. I was a basketball player and was very good. He was a bodybuilder, and I liked him and he liked me, but we kind of became sort of rivals until we realized, hey, that which we are offended by is usually something related to the self. So I got friendly with him. He went to the gym, and I started training about 15. But I'd already had those virtues from the physique. Superman and the Hulk and all those sorts of superhero characters always had muscles. So I thought if I had the muscles, that would complete this transition. That the way I looked wasn't necessarily the way I felt. So that was the construct. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was a massive inspirator because he'd done the bodybuilding and gone into acting and had found a way to use the physicality to make a career out of that. And I thought, well, shit, I'm not the most smartest guy on the planet. I can do that. I can build a body and use it for things that would pertain to that.
When I think of Australia and New Zealand, obviously they're usually clumped together, and people that are from other countries, everyone sounds the same. And obviously, when you spend time in both, you see the differences. As an Englishman going to Australia, I even saw the kind of animosity towards the British sometimes through some of the Australians. What is it as far as New Zealand? Is it normally pretty amicable, or is there even tension between those two nations?
Look, there is this trans-Tasman rivalry. It's almost like big brother, little brother. And one of the codes is rugby union. We have the All Blacks. And so they become the standard bearer that you can talk about anything you want, but when it comes to that, then New Zealand is the best in the world, or have been sort of the standard bearers. So that becomes a bit of a sticking point. There's other things we can argue about. Generally, the accent. I realized very quickly that you could be exploited for the way you sounded. So I was very quick in making sure that I lost the little twangs. I mean, New Zealand has this sooks and pin, and there's a change of the like with the English and the Americans. There's a vernacular, and so as an actor and things like that, and a performing thing, I realized if I changed that, I could hide in plain sight. So even at an early age, I realized how important the performance was. Walking into a room, I was very self-conscious, and so everything became this over-analysis of making sure that I was liked, that I was, the popularity thing, that quotient, making sure that you weren't going to be exploited for something that someone could have a go at you for.
I remember Justin saying a similar thing. His South African accent was dampened dramatically to kind of blend in.
Hiding in plain sight.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of the bodybuilding, before we progress through to kind of your career path, a lot of people that have been on the show, male and female, when they reflect now, again, with this kind of mature lens that we all have, realize that the outward projection of the muscularity was almost a kind of anatomical armor for that little boy or that little girl within. Was that an element for you?
Yeah. I mean, those muscles kind of represented all what was the best in the, for me, as the masculine, that you had this heroic looking body, and people could look at you, and that would sort of stop potentially that being picked on. I mean, I got bullied in high school, and that sort of overarching feeling of every day, is it going to happen today? There's this fear factor. And I thought, man, if I had this physique, if I had this ability to defend myself. So I kind of went on this journey of I went into security, so I went into bouncing, because I thought, where am I going to find this alpha male. And so I thought, well, the body's the start, the dealing, learning this aggressiveness and this forcefulness. And yeah, I stepped into those worlds, and it was very interesting to start playing. I used, anabolic steroids at that 19, which had a significant change and growing very fast. And that was this, meeting other guys. So when people say, John, you're a big guy at 6'3", 100 plus kilos. Well, in basketball, I was the third shortest in the team. And in the security industry, I was a lightweight at around sort of 110, 115. I was working with guys 140, 150 kilos. So I had this very interesting dynamic where I didn't feel any better than anyone else. I was still wanting to keep improving. Hey, you're not big enough. Your calves are too small. Your arms aren't big enough. So there was this criticism that looking in the mirror, even though at 19, I had this great physique that I look back now and go, wow, I didn't even stop to think how well I was doing. There was just a constant set, I was underneath that. You need to get bigger and you're not good enough. And I was still winning bodybuilding competitions. I won a junior state title 2 years in a row. And then I sort of got to the open and I thought, shit, I can't take the drugs and do this anymore. So bodybuilding stayed as a companion. But I realized following that ideal and the eating and the training and the obsessiveness and the loss of social life and every day, it was just on that I had to push myself to the limit. It was very limiting, but I guess it was on that cycle of just wanting to make sure that I was going to be enough. That was a constant sort of stick in the carrot where every day, nah, you're not there yet. You're not there yet. You're never going to get there, right? I'll show you. It's just me competing against me, which was, great to learn that. I realize looking back now, the only competitor I ever had in my life was me, but I projected it everywhere. Things I didn't like, and people like, oh, I like that. I want to have more of that. No, I don't need this. That lens is very interesting.
What about from the actual combat side? When you start getting in the world of bouncing, did you have a background as far as martial arts or grappling or anything? And if not, what was your learning curve in that profession?
No, like I said, I wished I had somebody early on. I mean, with my kids now, I've given them a sense of at least a skill set, a little bit of boxing, a little bit of grappling, something they can use just to kind of shore up. Like I'd rather they talked about it. I'd rather they communicated it. But if you've got to go, then at least you've got something in the toolbox. So I started with karate and then went to some boxing and then did some shoot fighting at the time, which is sort of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, aikido. And again, just taking all the little parts. I was smart enough somehow to know what worked for me. And then the athleticism and being a bigger guy and playing basketball, that peripheral vision and the quick hands really helped me set the tone that if I got in first and I did things quicker than they did, it was over. I wasn't a violent person. I just wanted to make sure that if I got into a situation, I could defend myself. And that confidence and competency of going, oh, okay, because I saw so much violence. And when you see that and get desensitized to it, I mean, you go into the stunt industry and the film industry and you see bloodshed and violence and it's so much sensationalized, and you realize when you're actually in it, we actually see bodies hitting the ground and people kicking and stomping on, it's horrific. It's not something and people, oh man, I'm going to bash you. I never got a great feeling. Even though I thought that's what I wanted, when I started doing it, I was like, nah, there's going to be a better way. And that's when I segued in the communication styles and using touch and transference and projection. All those things just became an offshoot of realizing, well, that was blunt force trauma. Now what?
Talk to me about that a little bit more. The psychology, the de-escalation element, the non-violent tools that you started developing as you progressed through.
I've liked looking at people as role models because there's no such thing as a self-made man. No one's going to learn it. They're going to get influenced. You're going to read a book. You're going to see something. So seemingly, I had an innate intuition and an intelligence that wanted me to be the best version. And when I started doing the things, like I said, stealing things early, getting caught, going straight, knowing that we're going to get sort of shunted and deviated off that path. So thinking I had to be this muscular, heroic guy who could beat people up and everyone would be afraid of me. I thought that's not going to work. I'm a loving person. I really, at the core of it, but it was an image that I wanted to protect. So how was I going to kind of caveat this experience with still being enough, still feeling confident, and no one's going to mess with you, but not necessarily having to prove it? Because, that's that energetic, when you meet someone and you realize, hey, that there's some power in there, and you don't have to necessarily see it to recognize respect or authenticity. So I looked at other guys around me that were intelligent enough. What were they doing? What was different to them than a guy who just punched someone in the face and knocked them out of the front door because they couldn't get in? They said, oh, that's bullshit. Boom. And it was like, wow, how can you do that? And I didn't even sort of relate back then that it was their stuff. I just thought, okay, that's what you got to do. And so over time, and realizing that if I put my hand on someone, and rather than coming directly eye to eye, I'd go to the side. I'd release that line of contention, which I later realized in Aikido it's just transference and using their energy against them. But I kind of knew things before I knew things. And then when I learned that, I was like, okay. So there was something already in me that I was just developing until I got a sense of having the science behind the knowledge as well.
Now, prior to getting into bouncing, did you have any other career aspirations?
I thought maybe the military would be an option. And I actually was in the recruiting office at 19 with pen in my hand, and I'm looking at it and saying, well, what do you want to do? And I thought, oh, maybe a PDI, going to the physical training, because I liked the body. I liked the physical aspects and pushing. And I thought, well, hey, that's something I could train with. And so I kind of waylaid. I thought, well, what else could I do? If I'm coming out of the military 4 or so years later, what am I wanting to do with that? And I still saw I wanted to do personal training. I wanted to work with the fitness industry. So I thought, well, I can just go and do that anyway. So I got a diploma of gym fitness instruction. And I thought, man, I work in a gym and there'll be beautiful people in there. There'll be a chance to meet girls. And of course, that's generally not the case when you go to a gym. There's you're dealing with lots of people who are wanting to improve their health and lose weight. And obviously there's lots of cleaning to be done. So I went into the gym industry and I was polishing gym equipment and disinfecting benches and vacuuming floors and the pH of the spas and all of these things. I thought, man, this is not what I want in the gym industry. But that helped set the tone of that cleanliness of recognizing that you can learn something anywhere you go. And it depends on who is supporting you. I think it's not only the job, but it's the environment. And so that environment, the guy who was running the gym became a bit of a mentor for me, started training me and giving me opportunities. He took me to a course about learning about phone etiquette, how to answer phones. So it was interesting that this whole kind of germination of skill sets just started to evolve. And then I met a guy who was doing bodybuilding, and he got me into competing because I was doing an anti-candida diet. Mum was always into her ologies and philosophies growing up, very alternate, which is a whole other talk about not only the feminine aspect, but all the spiritual and metaphysical and clairvoyance and numerology. So that was kind of behind the scenes of like, oh my God, not only am I this sensitive kid, I'm this weird sensitive kid just wanting to fit in. But over time, that just added to the library. But I realized that using your body, having that as a tool and the intelligence behind that, there was the mental, the physical, the spiritual aspects as well.
So how did you find yourself transitioning from bouncing to the stunt world?
So I left, the stunt, the bouncing's always been this fallback job. Anytime I needed work, I left Australia to go back to New Zealand in 95 and got some work doing security. There was always that was pre-licenses. You didn't need to have any security license to do that. And doing the gym work as well. And then traveled around the world, did this big backpacking experience, which was very, eye-opening, of realizing there's more to the world than that. And it wasn't until 1998 that I came back to Australia, and I was doing security again, and a guy had cut out a newspaper article, and it said, "Do you aspire to be the next Arnold Schwarzenegger? Do you have the physique of Superman and Batman?" And he gave it to me, and it was a job for Movie World. So I went and applied for Movie World and got the job as Superman. And I was just like, man, I can't believe that they would pay you to put a suit on and walk around. I mean, I'd do this for free. And it was better than having someone trying to punch me in the head and arguing with people. And there was a show there called the Maverick Grand Illusion Show, and there was a lot of stunties in there that had worked on a previous live action stunt show with horses and things like that. And I'm like, wow, I mean, who knew that you could get paid to play soldiers and play thugs and just be these villains, and they just pay you, exorbitant amount of money for me back then to pretend to get beaten up. I get beaten up, for $10 an hour. So now I'm getting paid to pretend like that. And so to have that physicality already through basketball, through the martial arts, the natural transition as a stuntman, they saw that. And even before I was graded, I was being given all these opportunities to work in stunts, and I'd even got a role at doubling John Cena on the Marine, which was kind of like a highlight, because I thought, well, hey, the wrestling side of things I love as well. I think that's a great way to the heels and the baby faces, this whole sort of pantomime soap opera for men that you can convince people otherwise. And I think we need this show, I guess, to create. And I love that. I love the fact that all of it was around this is what I pretend to be, not who I really am. And so stepping into that stunt world just opened up this an incredible new career. And security was still there. When I wasn't working on a film, I could just go back, work on the door, and then I could take the night off and do an audition. So it was like that was my working the bar or hospitality while I was trying to make a career in the film industry.
So I was traveling around the world, got to Sydney, saw a newspaper advert, same as you, looking for or auditioning for all performers for Universal Studios Japan. Went to that audition in Sydney, met Damien and Justin and all those guys. Ended up being cast for the role of T-1000 in the Terminator 2 show. And I think about 3 weeks later, I was on a plane off to Osaka. So talk to me about how that particular role came across your radar and how you found yourself, in the same building as me.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that serendipity or the fact that these opportunities come in. I'd worked at Movie World for 2 years, and then I found I was getting stale. I've never been the sort of person that wants to stay anywhere for too long. I get bored very quickly, which is a positive and a challenge. And so I was doing some massage work. I was doing fitness work, and I was married at the time, and I had a child who was probably about a year old. And it wasn't going great. I wasn't happy. I was just working, and there was lots of challenges. And so I heard about these Universal Studios auditions, and they were looking for characters, particularly an Arnold Schwarzenegger character. And I'd been Mr. Freeze at Movie World, and I used to do the accent. And like I said, with Arnold, it's like, oh my gosh, if I could follow in these footsteps. So I went to the audition and said, yep, you've got this audition. And I was just over the moon. I thought, well, how does something like this come about? 12 months overseas. I went and told my wife at the time, and I don't think she was suitably impressed. But I think I was at the point where I'm like, I just need to do what's right for me. And so, yeah, like I said, a couple of months later, we were on the plane heading over to Osaka. Got there, it was like snowing. It was bitterly cold, and stepping into that. They hadn't even set the show up. I think the first 3 months we were doing that training. We were running around the auditorium. We were doing mock-ups and improv and just trying to create the basis. And then Julia, at the time, our show director, was married to Dale Dye. And of all the things that I received from that time overseas, like my marriage didn't work and I lost that along the way, but I received this mentorship from the skipper. and that just set me on a whole new path of ideals and what you could do and all those things. So yeah, that 12 months, I think the first 6 months I was this very kind and loving person. I had my massage table. I was massaging people. Then I broke up with my wife, and then the next 6 months I was just debaucherous. I was just throwing caution to the wind. I was out running amok, doing all sorts of stupid things. So yeah, I think it was one of those sliding door catalyst moments where it was the best of times and the worst of times, but the friendships, the connections, the learning was worth the price.
It's amazing that the journey that a lot of the people from there have been on. I mean, there's tragic ones. Obviously we lost
Yeah.
Grant, we lost Brad, and then Dee Dee as well recently. But then you look at Steve Dunleavy. He's one of the ones I love to give an example, because Steve just put his head down, and he was, sometimes even mocked, I think, by some of the other stunt guys because he was brand new and everything. But I'll never forget, multiple times a week he'd be in there, he'd be drinking his Myoplex, and fast forward, now he's one of the the top guys in Hollywood on the stunt side. So yeah, I mean, this it's really amazing to kind of look back at that kind of symbiotic relationship and all those different personalities, and how they exploded across the world when we all went home.
Yeah, I think when your circle of influence is very driven people, and you think, well, everybody's doing that, but we're such a small niche of people that work in an industry. And I mean, even from the military or the first responders, it's such a small bandwidth of people that have the ideology that they want to change their life and they want to do something incredibly uh, change. You're putting it's risk. The greater the risk, the greater the reward, and people not necessarily want to put their life on the line, but we've seen with the stunt people, there's unfortunate accidents there, and so if you don't want to do it, then don't do it. But I think for those people who want something greater, they're looking, and sometimes the tragedies are the life changing moments, and sometimes the best things that happen to us can be our biggest obstacles. So it's interesting to see, in the film industry, they have a take and all the takes that we need to do. And those mistakes are just a learning process to go, well, I'll do it again. And when we get it right, hey, we're moving on. So I often see that the missed takes in life are very great opportunities to self-reflect, take a moment, debrief. Okay, what can I do now? What's the next opportunity? And so working in a show, I mean, we're doing 10 shows a day, 5 days a week over that 12-month period. And how do you just stay locked in and doing that show? And I know I mucked around. We would change the blocking. We would make things up. And the Japanese would just be pulling their hair out going, but Johnson, why? And I'm like, look, mate, I'm just, you don't understand how I can't do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. I'm gonna deviate and just come back and adjust, and that's just my process. And I know that doesn't work for everyone, but somebody who's a leader, somebody who sees that, can use that for something important. And this is where I see sometimes the challenge of the world is that there's not great leadership. There's just management. And if we're just going to manage, we're not going to get the best out of people, because being a leader is not necessarily being liked, but we need to respect the standard of what we're looking for. And I like that certain people in my life have led me, sometimes unfavorably, but it still gave me a very good sense of, yeah, you're right. You know what? I'll accept that. And I want to, not only do I want to impress them, but I want to live up to what they see in me, because everybody has potential. Everybody has talents, and some people use them.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of the mentorship that you got from Captain Dye, I think one of the biggest shocks for a lot of us probably was and I'm sure it's similar to the military members, everything is taken care of, housing, food, we had gym memberships, we had per diem, we had, train tickets, you name it, we had it. And then one day you go back and now you're back in the real world and having to put down money for an apartment and all the other things. And it was kind of a culture shock. And also, you've lost that tribe. You were with that T2 crew for 12, in my case 15 months, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're replaced and off you go. And it was jarring. So what was it like for you, that transition home, and then how did you kind of find your feet continuing in the stunt world?
I think I was ready to go. I felt like, I mean, they were offering everyone a renewal of contracts. And I know some people have stayed there and done incredibly well. For me, nothing against the Japanese culture, but it wasn't my culture. It wasn't something I necessarily resonated with. So I was quite happy to get out of there, come back to Australia, and start again. I was cleaning up with my marriage. I needed to go through the divorce process. I mean, my child was 18 months old, or nearly 2 years at the time, and that was a conflict of interest because there was another partner involved. I was kind of pushed to the side, so there was a lot of challenges. I mean, I didn't really save any money. A lot of that went through on lawyers and other factors of just trying to get myself back on track. But it was a nice way to reset and come back with a clearer sense of like, well, now I know what I want to do. And it wasn't long thereafter, like I said, went back to security, but then Dale Dye came back to Australia with a film called The Great Raid in 2002 and said, look, I'm looking for guys to I mean, in Japan, he sort of said to me, it's like, John, I can use a guy like you, which was nice. I felt like I had impressed him enough. And so when 2002 came around, I think we got back, at the start of that kind of 2001 era, December. So it wasn't that long after that, again, this like getting the newspaper clipping, somebody rings you up and says, hey, here's an opportunity. And that changed my life. I had 6 months on that. The skipper put me in as a platoon leader, so I had men under me. Because the great thing, I think, going to Universal Studios, I was around 29, 30, whereas a lot of the guys were 21, 22. It was a new opportunity, but I kind of had a little bit more maturity that I'd been through a theme park before. So, working security, I had this kind of mindset. So when I stepped into this leadership role on the film, so not only were we playing these soldiers in the Philippines in 1942, I was a platoon sergeant. So I had these men under me, and that gave me a real sense of pride to make sure that I was giving back and showing the standard and doing whatever I needed to do. And I was still training, and I was still fit, and I could do things that at my size that not a lot of other people could do. And it was interesting that I would create something on the camera, and the next minute, well, there's another camera on me because I'd managed to do something that the director liked. So I saw that nothing's set in stone, even though they've got an idea about the setting up that scene. If all of a sudden something happens that oh my gosh, that's great, do that again. So I loved, like I said, deviating from the show in Japan, deviating from the potentials on the film set. You could bring something to life. And I love that creativity. I loved, when you see a guy who's a big guy slamming himself into a wall or picking a guy up and that's just, we love that, right? That's where the stunts, everybody stops. Everybody wants to watch the stunts because that's where the action is. So again, this gave me this great sense of, hey, my gosh, people are watching. I'm getting this. I'm feeling enough right now at this particular moment. It's a very, I'm not saying it's an addictive feeling, but it's a very rewarding feeling to have people see you doing you, right? That's the point of finding these talents if we're looking. Because I wanted that. I kept searching for this. Who am I? Why am I here? What's the purpose of this process?
It's funny with the conversation with Dale. Prior to Universal, I was trying to get work in London as an actor and had put my name in for this show called Band of Brothers. Mm-hmm. And, it was in this freaking revolving door where I did a showcase. I had an agent from William Morris say, I really like what you're doing, but you wouldn't be in my department. So let us know when you get a role and we'll get the right person to come watch. Well, people in the acting world, if you don't have an agent, it's hard to get a role. If you don't have a role, it's hard to get an agent. So you're in this kind of vicious circle. But he'd said to me, damn, if I'd known you now, before, I said I would have used you. I probably would have been a Nazi with blonde hair and blue eyes, but regardless. So yeah, it was a shame, but I was on the back end of that where, yeah, again, had I had a relationship with Dale, I probably would have been able to be in that production. But, this is the thing, they say it's who you know. There's nothing magical about that. It's just, have you met this person? Have you got a relationship with this person? And does this person trust you and, know that you have the skill set to be able to perform on, this stunt show or on this set?
Yeah, we had some of the cadre that Skipper bought had been on that, Freddie Joe Farnsworth and Laird McIntosh and things like that. So it was interesting to have this access to these guys who were from the military or had acting experience, and watch them and glean, take, again, looking at the role modeling, what do I like, what don't I like? And again, that was sort of my first access to other forms of military units, and started to realize what the Marine Corps was and their point of difference, and the Army and their point of difference, and all of that. And of course, there's a great rivalry when it comes to any department that we want to distinguish ourselves as the best. And so even in the stunt world, there's competitiveness, and we're all vying for you're this guy, and you're the fight guy, and you're the fire guy, and you're the driver. And so there's always this kind of hierarchical, and it's ego. There's a lot of pride and a lot of ego in that. And I think it's important, and it's a distinction of not to have no ego, but to be ego-less, and realize that I'm not fighting you. I'm just fighting the standard that I want to compare myself. And each person, I guess, wants to have their own level of success, in that arena. And it was interesting then going on to the Pacific, which was the kind of the sister of the Band of Brothers. And we all thought, man, Band of Brothers was just amazing. One of the best series of all times. The casting, the scripting, the unity. I think not only did we see that the 101st had this stigma and this respect and this honor, but even the guys who got to play them created their own band. And that was through the boot camps. And it's through the boot camp. And we had a little 3-day boot camp in Japan, which I thought was the best experience of the whole. I'd come home at the end of the day and I'd be sore and I'd be tired, but so pleased that we got to test ourselves, the running, the physicality, the ideals of figuring out, the puzzles that he'd set for us, and the competitiveness. And you talk about Steve Dunleavy. I mean, he was kind of like this nemesis for me, because we were kind of on the same par, height-wise and physicality. And I remember he beat me by 1 second in one of the drills. And, the skipper was like, John, you almost had him there. And I'm just kind of like, fuck, I know, and it's still today, right? It was like, I could have beat him. I should have won, right? So again, this level of bringing out the best in us. And I think that's what the skipper and learning these boot camps. Like, it's one thing to be on the film and everything's set and here's the scenes and here's what we're shooting, but the boot camp was not scripted. So all the actors, all the special ability extras would all get together and would live in these off-grid and the pop-up tents on the Great Raid. We were training to go against the Japanese. And again, that was a 12-day boot camp. I think it was another 11-day boot camp with the Pacific. But it was interesting to see how people showed up. And even the great actors, even people who were playing these characters, they were acting. And so you could see a lot of them struggled to do the physicality of it, the orienteering, the weapons handling, the pressure, the stress. And so that's why Skipper created these boot camps, is to get everybody locked in, everyone on the same page. What can we use? How's this going to work? And so when they start rolling, there's no, the mag changes are seamless. The transitions, people are just doing what they've been trained to do, which I got a lot out of. I was one of these people who were like, I've lived my whole life to get to this point where you put me in. I love that more than the film, because it was real. You couldn't act your way through that. And then you're on an even keel with the Benjamin Bratts and all these actors that we had to play with. there was no distinguishing. And you realize over the years and these great people you meet, what's the point of difference? Yes, you're an actor or a star, but you're human. And where does that put you in the scheme of things? Are you kind? Are you considerate? I watched that episode that you had with Josh Brolin, and I'm like, what an incredibly intuitive guy that not only is an amazing actor, but a very deep and philosophical, and I really respond to people who I get to see the inner track as well as the outer extension.
Absolutely. It's funny with the boot camp. I never told anyone this, but I separated my shoulder on that boot camp because I don't know if you remember, there was one thing. I don't know if you guys were there or if you were being taken off to do Terminator stuff, but they had plastic cups and they would throw it at the T-1000s. We had to freeze if we got tagged and fall over.
Yes.
Well, I froze and I fell over, but I forgot that when you fall over, you only need to put your hand down. And I freaking tore the shit out of my shoulder. Either broke my collarbone or separated. I never got it looked at. So yeah, for the first several weeks, I was masking an injury that I had because I'm like, I can't tell everyone I got hurt a few days into getting to Japan. But yeah, that was so good. I mean, the cadence marches or the runs that we did singing Birdie on the windowsill, it did. I mean, by the end of the day, we'd be annoying the shit out of the rest of Kaigandori singing our Ura songs. And I mean, if you can bring people together in 3 short days, I can only imagine what they were able to do in Band of Brothers. And I had Shane, who played Doc on Band of Brothers, on the show. And some of the insight and keeping the guy, I forget the actor's name, but the guy that played Ross in Friends, they kept like keeping him away from the cast to piss them all off, and it worked. I mean, it's so obvious on screen. So yeah, I mean, what Dale ended up developing was genius for the any kind of realism in the military world in Hollywood.
And he wasn't always committed for it. I mean, he was the sort of character you either liked him or you didn't, and he could, on set sometimes and working with other departments, they would absolutely be pulling their hair out because he'd wanted to do things and change things and create this authenticity, which didn't always work for all the other departments. And so I guess, we talk about that leadership of respecting it. People, and the great quote, because I remember him talking to about certain things. And I'm like, but Skipper, and he goes, John, some people get it and some people don't. And that's just stuck with me through all of it, that it's not for everyone. And there's no point trying to bang your head against a wall or change people's points of view when if they're not ready to receive the information or they're opposed to it, don't argue. Don't try to, just see what you can do to segue and adjust and adapt, because then you're happier. You're not struggling to fix things, and you just accept that it's going to be what it is. And I think when you're part of this unit, whatever you're in, from any level of career, there's a goal to be achieved. And if we can play our part, stunts is a very small part of the film industry, very, very important part, but it's not any more important than hair and makeup or the rigging or costuming or greens or props. Everybody's bringing this little fingerprint, or a little brush stroke on the art to make it seamless. And if everyone does their job well, you just see the creative enterprise, and you don't stand out and go, well, that was good, but that was crap. And that's the directorship. I had a chance a couple of years ago to first AD a film. And that's another whole level of eye-opening, because you're the conductor and there's all these moving parts and it's personal and it's emotional, and just trying to seamlessly make all this stuff happen behind the camera. And it's one thing to be a performer but somebody has to be leading, somebody's conducting, somebody's the architect of that focus. So, yeah.
So you had the good fortune of having some films that were related to Dale, so who's able to kind of bring you on. One of the biggest challenges I know in the film side of the stunt world is the whole hustling, is getting known on set. Now you have some of these films under your belt. What does it look as you progress into kind of timelines where Dale isn't present with a film or a project for you at that point?
Yeah, look, the good fortune, Alexander was Morocco and Thailand, and that was a 19-day boot camp. At that time, I took a one-way ticket to North Africa, and you couldn't do that anymore. And and so huge production, $170 million back in 2003. Val Kilmer, Colin Farrell, Angelina Jolie. I mean, it should have been a massive, massive success, but it ended up being, a relatively not a good success because of all the variables. But then, you come off an Alexander and then you go into a TV series, or you're not necessarily going to handpick what the next role is going to be. So you have this incredible come down when you come off these experiences where you've got these larger than life characters, your role, from the Great Raid, platoon sergeant, to the Pacific, where I was playing a corporal and that as well. And I was part of the secondary cadre and wrangling the extras and fixing things up there. And then Alexander was prior to that. But again, given a radio, given these responsibilities. So I loved the fact that I could play multiple roles. And even now, working with a certain director, he lets me be the third. He lets me have an acting role. I can sometimes jump on the stunt side of things. Having this ability to do more with less, I've always relished that. And sometimes the worst thing that can happen is you're given a role and you're just sitting around all day and there's nothing to do and you get bored. Case in point, I was on Legend of Zorro, and they told, come over to Mexico, and it'd be a 6-week job. I'll get to play the train stoker, and I'll have a fight with Zorro, Antonio Banderas, and I'll get thrown off the train. Well, I got there and we were just sitting around and not really doing much at all. We weren't being engaged. We weren't necessarily we weren't on set every day. So the laziness or the boredom, you start drinking, you start going out to these clubs and so forth. And I remember I got into a bar fight in San Luis Potosi at like 2:00 in the morning. And we're out in the streets punching on with the doorman and with some of the other cast members. And I ended up breaking my hand and busted lip and stuff. And I got sacked and got sent home and was sort of unceremoniously told, well, that's the end of your career. You'll never work again. And I was like, oh my gosh. But then secondary to that, I got a role if I hadn't have got sacked, I wouldn't have got the role doubling John Cena, and I wouldn't have gone on to do other things. So it was interesting. I said sometimes the worst things are the greatest experiences and vice versa. But it was a learning curve about the mental health of making sure that every day being prepared, whatever it is, having a standard, having the discipline, and not getting bored. And it is tough when you have this incredible job and it pays well and you think, I'm one of the very few that get to do that. And yet I'm not sure. I don't know who I am right now. And that restlessness, that boredom, or that sense of creative enterprise can get me into trouble. I know that. And I'm still learning that today. It doesn't go away, surprisingly. And I'm still finding myself sometimes having to pull myself back because I haven't changed. I'm still the same kid I was 45 years ago, as a 12-year-old. So it's interesting.
Well, speaking of that on set, when you reflect back, there's many examples, obviously, of tragic deaths on scene, and then a lot of near misses. What we do on the stunt side is very dangerous. What we do on the firefighting side is, I would argue, a lot more dangerous. It's funny when my friends in the fire world are enamored by the stunts. It's like, yeah, but we know what's going to happen. As long as someone doesn't stick a sword in my eye, apart from that, we should be good. What we do, we don't know if the whole house is going to collapse on our head. But when you reflect back now, what was some of the near misses that you remember, whether it was personally or on the set in general?
Yeah, thankfully, I've never had any major experiences, negatively. I mean, I've been punched in the face a lot, but I used to get punched in the face anyway, right? As a training process or within work. So it's interesting. You're on set and you're doing a scene with one of the actors, and they get a little overzealous and they'll punch you in the face. And the worst thing they'll do is go, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." And you're like, "Don't stop, keep going." And we can't even use that, right? So sometimes them punching me in the face is what they'll actually use. So I think sometimes that level of the difference between somebody punching you out of negativity is different getting punched out of an accident. It has a different level of feeling inwardly, and so I've seen people break their legs. It seems with horses. We saw stuff on Alexander. A guy got run over by a chariot, snapped his pelvis. You see these situations where, it becomes life-threatening. And it's supposed to be organized chaos. And until somebody deviates, or especially if you're working with horses. I mean, we had one scene with 20 elephants and 40 horses and 800 extras and stunt guys with 22-foot-long sarissas, and things are galloping, and you're like, all right, I'm dying. And then an elephant comes, you go, no, I'm not dead, I'm up. And so I think the pressure that we can put on ourselves, I mean, unless you're on fire, unless you're falling off something, that level of adaptation that you trust you get that intuition. I've spoken to some guys who got incredibly burnt or broke their backs, and I asked them, did you know something was going to happen? And they said, yeah, I had this feeling and generally because they're pushing the light, they're running out of time. Can you go faster? Can we change this? And as a stunt person, you don't want to go, I don't know if I want to do that. And the coordinator goes, well, I can swap you out if you want. No, I'll do it. Right. So it's interesting to have that pressure sometimes. It's not like, I can't imagine that you're in a situation as a firefighter and a first responder that something's happening and you go, I don't know if I want to do this, right? That'd be pretty much a career suicide if you're not ready to back up your teammates and so forth. So it's not so much individualized that one person's going into the burning building, right? It's a team effort. But in stunts, you're sometimes put on the spot where it's up to you and the pressure's on. And that's very interesting to put all of that pressure. There's hundreds of $1,000s of pyros and things happening, and all these people are waiting for you to do one thing right. And it's up to you to get that one thing correct. And it can be very technical. You've got to run in, you've got to do this, take some squibs, hit a button, do an air ram, whatever. I mean, it's very integral for a couple of seconds of film, but yet potentially can kill you. And nobody's going to know that. I mean, it's wonderful now that the stunt industry is going to be recognized, I think 2027, the Oscars, which is great. I mean, it's well overdue. But again, is that an ensemble? Is that the coordinator? Is that it's still unsung heroes that the stunts is such a big part of it. And yet you could ask someone, name me 10 top stunt guys. I doubt they could give you one. Name the great firefighters and police officers. So sometimes the people we get recognized for the star power. But wow, you read lines off a page better than someone else. Aren't you amazing?
Yeah, I mean, even on the podcast, when I started this and I realized, I've got so many people in the stunt world that I want to talk to. Some of them like you that I work with, some people that are just extended, like Olivia Jackson. I don't know how many podcasts are even out there. So even in the podcast space, I don't see like a huge amount of stunt podcasts. So I had Ben Jenks on the show, Ben Jenkin on the show, who was in the Fall Guy. He was one of Ryan Gosling's doubles. And and it's like, even in that world, in the podcast world, a lot of people aren't talking to the stunt performer. They're all, lining up to interview the Hollywood star. But to me, equally as interesting, sometimes more so, are the people that are behind the scenes that are doing most of the work and getting none of the glory.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, when you look at people who are attracted to that risk in first responders, into the stunt world, into a sense of somehow pushing the envelopes of the physical, of the emotional and mental. What makes somebody want to do that? What makes somebody want to go into the military and put their life on the line for an ideal? Or so, and generally, if you look back into their history as a child, it was directly influential, that this journey that they've gone through. There's usually trauma there. I don't know, working in the security industry, a lot of the guys I work with came from broken homes, came from violence, came from abuse, and so wanted to find a way to, create this character that was unfuckable with. Mm-hmm. And wanting to get these accolades, or the sense of like, I'm doing something to show you that I'm capable of this strength and this inner world, which to me, the psychology, as I get older now, I'm not watching as much sport. I don't watch things for the pleasure. I watch it for the decision-making ability, those little sense of adjustments and adaptation. When you see someone under pressure, what do? How are they going to respond? And I don't think we get taught that. As the word education, the Latin word educare means to bring out. So if we're going to educate people, we don't need to put stuff in and tell them what to do. We can recognize what's already in there. How can we support that? Are you a leader? Are you somebody good with numbers? Are you good with your hands? Are you kinesthetic? I mean, if there was an early age through schooling, if there was an education system that supported the individual for what they were good at, that'd change the whole paradigm. We wouldn't have to wait till we left school or went through jobs to segue, and we would get smart people. Hey, you're good at that. Oh, I like that. That's good leadership. That's a good training aspect. So now I start to see that's where, and I see you've created a niche for yourself. You said you somebody should be doing something about this, and here you are. So, physician, heal thyself. Let's all step up. Let's do what we need to do so that we don't have to go through this struggle. We don't have to deal with this trauma alone, because somebody's recognized how to support that. And yet, each journey is it's not, we don't have a right to step in and fix someone's life unless they're asking, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Well, speaking of that whole kind of philosophical, back to the, the compassionate, empathetic element of your upbringing, when you reflect back now, when did this transition start to happen that took you into, what you're doing now, the kind of life management, life skills element of your journey?
I was aware, some books came across my path around 19 and 20, and one of those was The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. And then I read The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. And those books kind of gave me the story with the lessons or some insights and some opportunities. And I love that it wasn't just a textbook. I didn't like textbooks. I don't want to read about stats and if you do this and the hypothesis and the quotient. I like watching and learning and going, and I'm getting educated at the same time. It was like these boot camps. So from that age of 19, 20, not that I had those fully informed decision makings, but I started to be aware that this spiritual feeling inside of me wasn't just a religious thing. It was an inner world, and that was my world, and only I could see it. Only I was involved in it, and I needed to find ways to shore that up. So while I had this physical form, and while I had these skills, that something on the inside was supporting that, and there was an equal percentage of inner world versus outer world, and finding that balance. And it wasn't probably till my 40s that I really started to see that sense of all of those things coming together. The 20s and 30s, it was kind of lots of rehearsals and lots of learnings and what I thought I wanted. Oh, no, that's not right. A couple of relationship changes. I mean, two children to two different women, and then being with other partners who had children and being a stepdad. And so there was all of these kind of things that came along until finally I went, you know what? I don't think there's anything that could come along now and surprise me, and just kind of shock me like, shit, I never even thought of that. So now everything becomes this filtering of what is this and what's that, and this analysis of this mind. I can see it. And I have this kind of inner knowing. And it doesn't mean to say I don't struggle or have my battles. It just gives me, that's my focus. And that's what I can work on. So, now I see there's an opportunity as a leader to give back, because those individual successes, those winning bodybuilding trophies, being on a stage and performing, it's not about me anymore. I thought it was. Now it's about us. Now it's about a collective consciousness that if we don't all, are included in that, then somebody's suffering and somebody's left out and we leave them behind, and then we've got a problem. Like as a first AD, I realized one of the first things I needed to do every day was to check on everybody's mental health. Because if somebody wasn't feeling well, if somebody wasn't ready to go, I needed to get in that. That was the first point of call, right? Rather than is the cameras ready and is everything set up? How's everybody feeling? Because if that person starts to struggle and it's a 12-hour day and they're not, and maybe we don't eat and they haven't slept well, that's a big problem in the mental health. And we don't know sometimes how much people are struggling because you're on a film set more sometimes than you're at home with your family and your social life. And then the weekend comes and you just want to sleep. Before you know it, you're back on set again. Are you ready? Are you prepared for this battle that's going to occur? And as much as I love it, you do 3-4 months full on, back to back to back, it wears you down. And where do you find those people to pick you up, or where's your little golden nuggets of wisdom that are going to hold you that integrity, true to thyself?
So what were some of the tools that you started collecting? I mean, you have this very physical world up to this point with bodybuilding and bouncing and stunts, but you had this exposure to the kind of philosophical side in your early life and then these books. But what did you start realizing, especially in your 40s, were actually working? What was this kind of nuanced healing collection of tools that you found?
That deepening, I think there was some inner healing, like those traumas that I didn't let go of, and I didn't even know were there. I'd done such a good job of compartmentalizing myself. And I think at 36, I got to a point where I physically felt well. I was running clubs, and I had this authority, and I felt respected. And I looked within myself, and I thought that same feeling I had as a child is still prevalent. What is that? And it's like this beautiful sense of divinity. And I feel it's like it's this beautiful flower. And if somebody was to look at that, they'd laugh or they'd go, "Oh my God, that's you." And so I felt this shame that I wasn't enough. And it wasn't until I realized that by feeding this part of me and germinating it and helping it to grow, that it was going to become this well-rooted, well-supported internal aspect of myself that reached into all of me, not just the parts that I thought were going to work well. And so the physical was one part, the intelligence was another part. But the compassion, that self-love, that sense of regulation that I could say, okay, just take a moment, take a deep breath, right? Whatever's going on, I feel like I have the right to stop anything at that particular time, which a lot of people I don't think have the authority to be the overarching governance of themselves. They're very compliant, they're very submissive, go along to get along. And I think that's part of how we're programmed as a child and the indoctrinations of governance and things like that. So when I realized how powerful I was and what standard of life that I could have, and breaking out of some of those paradigms, those limiting self-beliefs, and, using psychedelics, I went to Peru in 2017 and I sat with the Shipibo Indians and did some rounds of ayahuasca and really sat, and that's very confronting. It's not something that everybody I feel has to do or needs to do, but if people are really curious, if they really want to get to the core of themselves, there are methodologies that can really open up and peel back those layers, and it's an incredible awe-inspiring realization that what I see outside of me is potentially just an illusion. And all of what's formed inside of me comes from me. And that's a revelation that I create my own reality. What I feel about, what I see, what I'm projecting on, my identity, my values of money and relationships, and working on that every day, polishing that, honing that, refining that skills. So when that started, like I said, at 19 and 20, I was aware of something much, much larger than myself, and took me on a journey through Japan and through the world and through relationships of recognizing, well, that's me. Oh, that's me. And I'm only attracted to me. That electromagnetic frequencies, the electricity of the spark, and then the magnetics. It's either repulsive or it's attractive. And if I'm attracted to it, that's me. If I'm repulsed by it, maybe that's still me, but a different part of me. And I'm able to distinguish. It's not about like and dislike. It's about acceptance and letting go.
I've had a lot of conversations recently about people that have done ayahuasca or ibogaine, one of these similar ceremonies, that a lot of times that there'll be kind of a tune-up and they'll go back again. But the conversations that happened recently is that, well, if you do, for example, ayahuasca, you've opened the door. Now there's all these other things that you can do, meditation, breath work, all the things to help you unpack what you discovered in ayahuasca. So were there any kind of real aha moments as far as things earlier in your life? And then what did you do to help process those from then on to where we are today?
Being led, I started to realize it wasn't me driving the bus. Some of the greatest opportunities came to me through opportunities. And so when I recognized that I didn't necessarily have to create my process, I could step in and out. And sometimes when I felt too responsible or I thought it was all me, that's when things started to fall apart. I know if I got aggressive or I got angry, it changed the way that I received the information, and I would hurt myself or and not that I can be this, don't get me wrong. In no way am I advocating that somehow I've got all the answers or that my life, is some spiritual bliss. It's just interesting to see me. I watch myself very intently, and I see myself doing it and reacting badly, and then having some time to regulate and process that, and I can come back and say, hey, I'm sorry, I lost my temper, and role modeling those things that I never got. So when my first marriage, I was talking to my dad, I actually had a lot more compassion for my dad when I saw the questions that I was going to ask or that I was asking, because I thought, well, Dad, how come when, you and Mum split up, what happened? Why didn't you want us? And it was interesting. He had another woman in his life, and she had her family. And there's a story that gets attached to the narrative, and it might not be his story, but that's history, isn't it? Of what I create for myself. And so when I started to see another version and another accountability, I was able to edit, my narrative and make it a better story for myself that I could work with. And over time, I guess the biggest realization of just how easy it is to go in and just edit some of those scriptings, that it's not that. I wasn't punished. I was educated. I was informed. I was enlightened. And by changing the word, changing the positive aspect from the negative, has such a great effect for me, that I live more at peace with myself because I don't persecute myself. I don't wake up with that relentless pursuit. Hey, John, you're not good enough. You did a shit job. It's like, okay, I hear you. Thanks for pointing that out. And what makes you, I can have this internal dialogue with myself, which is like sitting in men's group. We have the talking stick, and whoever's got the talking stick can talk. And as long as we know how long for, so I use all those principles, both inner and outer, to support. And again, that's just my process. I don't advocate that for everybody, but it's interesting to share the stories or share the ideals, and people go, yeah, I'm going to just cherry pick all those good things and then leave the rest.
So how did you go from your own journey of healing to start helping other people with what you were learning?
I've been involved from an early age, like I said, going into the fitness industry. I had a good idea of training my body and that saying, what's the best way to be in shape? Well, never get out of shape. just be consistent, right? There's no point, there's the cofactors that come with that. So I started as a personal trainer, and then I went into massage, and then I went into the coaching industry. And I was, like I said, the whole point was about the psychology, because I saw the people's bodies were created by the lifestyle. The lifestyle was created by their habits and their behaviors and the ideas. Even our bodies, when we store trauma, I mean, it's about backing yourself up. It's about shouldering the load and stepping into life. So if we've got these injuries, or we've got some of these challenges physically, is it a psychosomatic experience that where the mind goes, the body follows, and we can hold trauma? If we suppress enough emotion, is that depression? And so I started to keep looking all the way through, wanting to support people, wanting to help people, recognizing I was only doing it for myself. And my partner I'm with now, we've been together 4 years, and she's got an equine facility. She's got horses there that people come in with neurodiversity, ADHD, and autism. And I started using the horse as another way to support people, because the horse can hear your heart rate or detect your ability from about 6 meters away. So it's a non-verbal way. I don't have to tell you anything. The horse already knows. And that's saying you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Sometimes you can't even lead the horse. It ain't moving because it doesn't believe in you, and it doesn't trust you because it knows your limits. So I keep finding ways to expose the growth and healing. And you can, there's breath work, there's plunge pools, there's, all these natural experiences that have been around for thousands and thousands of years, which I think holistically is much more supportive and positive for people than seeking pills and psychology sometimes, or let's talk about your childhood. There are ways to just, we need both. I'm not saying it's one or the other, but it's a combination of what works for everybody. So I'm still on that path now, and thanks to you and people who have inspired me to create a channel, to create a broadcast of ideals. I love listening to podcasts. I love listening to people talk and getting this ideal of oh yeah, I like that. I'm going to do more of that. So my partner and I got together, a colleague I've worked with in security. He's former military, so he's got his own challenges that he's working on. And we've got a channel called Strong, Happy, Healthy, Loved. And it's just around mental health awareness, social connection, positive self-talk, and again, just a way to give back, a way to support the ideals and the sense, if not now, then when? And if not me, then who? Absolutely. I have a responsibility. I want to be there because I've seen people be there for me and showing up for me. So I want to show up for others.
Now, we talked before I hit record about the thing, that a video I did recently on cowardice and finding courage. And one of the things I touched on briefly in that little video that I made was, again, I feel like we've gone for full circle back to where you were when you were 15, because a lot of our idols were bodybuilders in the 80s.
Yeah.
And there's this one section now that's trying to show young men that if you just grow a beard and you take a bunch of tests and you grow your show muscles, then you are now a man. Now, don't get me wrong, there's lots of people that are amazing selfless servants and incredible warriors that happen to have muscles and beards, but I'm talking about the costume of. So talk to me about that kind of alpha machismo masculinity that I feel is kind of a Xerox of when we were little, rearing its head where you are now in Australia.
Yeah. I think when you're one-dimensional, at some point it's going to show up as a lack of. If you're just there as a poser, right? And the idea that I look great and listen to me because I have the answers. And I've seen some of these people come and go. I've seen people who have had, these great channels with great ideals, and then they die in their 40s, take their lives, or, they've had heart attacks or things like that. So the sense of like, well, don't just listen to me, watch me and use that as a bit of a barometer, that it's more about the longevity of how long you've been doing it for. It's a proven track record, that it's consistency and it's discipline. And the thing is now, and I mean, I still watch bodybuilding. I still love the psychology of what makes somebody want to be 5'3" and 300 pounds. And, again, only that person's going to have their own intelligence to that. But the drug use, and nowadays, if you look back to, in the 50s, and you have your Steve Reeves and your John Grimmicks and these incredible guys who sort of all the drugs and insulin and growth hormone, the Mr. America title wasn't just about the body. It was about their life. It was about how they exemplified and the respect that they showed. And so the title held more than just the prestige that they looked good. They needed to show some validity, that the life that they lived was in fact in an alignment with their values. And so nowadays we've got this get big quick. We've got, guys take so much more PEDs and things like that just to look good on the beach. There's no reason to do that. I mean, train hard, eat well, maximize all the things that you can do. And then if you want to break a new barrier, maybe try something. But just to start with that, you'll never know any other way if it's influenced from the external. And so this is where I kind of see, it needs to come from the inside out, not from the outside in, because we have all these influences and we have all these people that are making money and have success. And yeah, I get that. I mean, maybe if I was 15 growing up in a world today, I could have that same experience. It's interesting to look back at pre-world, no internet, no phones. If I wanted to learn something, I had to go and get a book or read a magazine. I couldn't just Google it. There was no instant knowledge. And so, yes, it's better, but potentially it's made more of a challenge because you don't have to go out and learn it. Hey, AI, you know what I mean? Write this assignment for me. Give me the answers and I'll just follow. Where's that journey of self-discovery? So I like the fact that, maybe we're in a position now. We talk about this moral courage, these standards, these principles, that if we get out there and we lay this blueprint and this foundation, some people might go, hey, I'm really attracted to that, John, or, tell me more. And so we'll have a group or a tribe that will want to come in. And it's okay, right? I mean, go to the library. How many books are there, right? Different authors, different ideas. You had Brian Tracy, you had Bob Proctor, you had Jim Rohn. Now you've got, DeMartini, and you've got Robbins, and they're not telling us anything different from the knowledge that Socrates or Plato and Aristotle had. I mean, there's just principles and values that can be lived and adhered to. And we will see that over time through their bodies, through their actions, how they're living their life, looking at their relationships. It's very simple, but I think so many people want it and want it now. Take a pill. I've got a headache, take a pill. Maybe drink some water. Maybe go out in the sun, have a breathe. Is there tightness in your body? We're just looking to just quickly segue and we want to get rich. And I'm not saying we all, and I'm not collectively. There's just a predication of something that's has to happen now. And now we move on. We've missed the point, because it's an investigation for me that I like to ask the questions and the quest die on, right? The language is there to support that seemingly it's hidden. It's all hidden in plain sight if we want to look for it. And whether we want to stand up, whether we want to stay seated, I mean, you'd see it too. I mean, when there's a situation that happens and it happens very quickly, you'll see people do three things. They'll either sit forward, like ready, because they want to act. You'll see them sit back, right? Like, oh, shit. Or you'll just see them stunned, like, oh, what's going on? And then we know. And this is why the tests and the evaluation that we can look at in our own lives anyway, that's all I can work with. It's just me and my experience. But I work with clients and I have people in my life who require me to show up and be the very thing that I'm promoting. It's that synchronicity and alignment.
What about from the mental health perspective? I feel like that facade of masculinity is almost tapping back into the speaking about your feelings as weakness. Now, don't get me wrong, there's certain groups that the pendulum swung so far that they're, crying at the drop of a hat, and that's kind of I think lessening the conversation sometimes. But I think that we've really made progress in a lot of professions, especially in the men, because we are more stubborn and we do tend to kind of hide our feelings more. And this resurgence of this kind of this is where I think the word toxic masculinity is right. These dipshits that are masquerading as men that are, because they don't have the courage to actually look in the mirror and go, I need to work on me, are the same ones that I hear still shaming people about struggling.
Look, I'm a big advocate for men's health. I mean, being a male and seeing how important it was for me to be around strong men. I mean, there's something very powerful when strong men and good men. I mean, that saying, evil exists when good men sit back and do nothing. And so potentially, look, I'm sometimes a bit of an objector to seeing that. Look what gets promoted. Sometimes whoever's in charge or whoever's controlling the narrative will do things as a way of promoting something that works for them. And so there's consumerism, there's money to be made, there's a standard. So I think you and I can agree. I mean, I found lots of good men. I found things that support me, and I'll only be around situations that support me, and I'll actually call out any behavior that I see, in society or anywhere that I recognize we need to stop and correct all the time. And part of that is the communication. I mean, part of the challenge that we've lost is that using the words and the confrontation, like you said, that toxic masculinity, it's only toxic because that's what we're calling it. But really, it's an ignorance that we've lost something about what men are here to do. And if we've changed the narrative on what the feminine is, and the feminine now has a way to step in and confront the masculine, that's not feminine. The feminine never wants to stand directly in front of things and challenge. That's a masculine behavior. That's confrontational. So it's interesting when we start to look at the whole narrative of looking back through our history and how the women's movement came. The women's movement was challenged and created by other women, and it was split down the middle, that not all women wanted to be bra burning and stand up. Some of them are quite happy to stay at home and be wives and love their role as a mum. And yet they were sent to work. Now we want this money, this Me Too movement. And I'm all for equality, don't get me wrong. But can men and women be equal? No, because I can't have a child, right? You can't give me that. So there's no equality. So we need to look at the physiology and say men have this physical strength. And we are the patriarchal sense that if men decide to run amok, there's nothing women can do, right? So we need the masculine to support the feminine. And we need the feminine to honor the masculine. And they say women want to be cherished and men would like to be honored. And so I don't know if we will see that come back around. I'd love to see that come around. I'm all for a happy ending to things. But when we've got people in positions of power that are moderating and have the stranglehold on what is being ideologized and the sense of now that what we're talking about, maybe that's not true. And so we need to have this sort of balance in the world, what we're doing. We're offering another version rather than the promoted sense that this is what we're being funded on. I mean, I look at a lot of shows now on TV, and there's lots of the promotions of the minority groups, and we're seeing lots of different storylines and narratives from days where the 70s, the 80s, there was an exploitation potentially. I mean, white males were playing Asians or playing Indians. And so, yeah, there's lots of challenges when it comes to, is it fair and equal? No, because it's Hollywood. And so Hollywood is about money making. It's about control. And so I don't know, can we change it? Would it be great to change? Or at least we're stepping in as a point of difference to say, hey, I'm a good man. I'm going to act like a good man. I'm going to show up as a good man. Talk to me if you want to, but please don't judge. Please don't paint us all with the same brush. And so I think sometimes until we do that, how are we going to get these younger guys who are just following what they've been shown?
Yeah.
So to stop and correct some of the stuff. And I don't know how high we can go. I'm watching you, as an ideal, as a person who you didn't know you could do anything about it. I mean, potentially what I heard, you saying you were waiting for someone else to step in. Why is this happening? And we're asking the questions. I think there's lots of young men and young women who want to see a change. They just haven't found it yet. And so this system, if it's flawed, our next generation, they're not going to put up with this as well like we're doing. They're going to break that as well, as we want to break our chains of conformity and traditionalism. It can't stay the same. It just won't. So I'm excited to see the drop off. We will see it evolve until such time as people go, are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. Nah, because they'll just keep pumping out, whoever they are. They'll just keep putting out their narrative until we say, no, that's enough. You got to stop. That's bullshit.
I think we're getting there now. I really do. I think, like you said, the DEI influence on a lot of things. I mean, my profession and all the other ones, it was a real spit in the face to all the people of whatever minority group that earned their way and met the standard and are phenomenal police officers and firefighters and EMTs or soldiers. But then in Hollywood too, like every single thing has to now include every single member of a group. It's like, that's not how life is. But, let's take a step back. What has changed? Well, I was talking to my son the other day. Look at the adaptive community. Look at like you said, the neurodiverse. People with cerebral palsy, people with autism and Downs, they were kept away from society for a long time. Now they're freaking winning, running Hawaiian triathlons and, realizing the incredible intelligence in some of the autistic community. And I mean, it's so good to see. So we have evolved. And even with this whole, I was talking to my wife, this whole, the gay community getting upset about not being included. I was like, well, wait a second, time out. I remember when I was a kid, we had Boy George. We had Kenny, I can't remember his last name now. He was a comedian, super, Kenny Everett, yeah. So that was absolutely part of our culture. And we're talking about the 70s and 80s. Liberace, Elton John, Wayne Sleep. I mean, all these people from all these walks of life that happen to be gay. So I think you're right. Like they're just scrambling now. They're just clamoring for attention, whether it's the bearded, swollen douchebag or whether it's the person with pink hair and piercings screaming about who knows what. And I really feel like this is exactly what you said. It's the time for the normal people to step the fuck up. Have some guts, though, which is what my whole video was about. You've got to stop being apathetic to things that need you to stand up. Like, I'll put it front and center. October 7th was fucking horrendous and an absolute tragedy. What has happened resulting in 20,000 children being killed and a lot of our nations turning their head is nothing short of disgusting. And it shows the cowardice of people of not being able to stand up and say, look, I'm not an anti-Semite when I say that is fucking wrong. I understand the backstory of this conflict. I get it all, but Jesus Christ. I mean, you talk about crossing a line, with the vaccine, with the whole vaccine thing with COVID, like time out. Let's look at obesity. Let's look at how we're feeding our children. Let's look at PE programs. The healthier you are, the better the outcome of COVID. And what happened when we came out of that? Fucking nothing. Nothing changed when it came to improving the health of the nation. So this is where us, the normal people, need to step up and say enough is enough. But like, to your point, you have to actually say it. You have to be able to say, I don't care if I'm going to be unfriended by some people or my fucking great aunt is going to be pissed off at the next Easter dinner. I don't give a fuck. This is wrong. And this is where this call to courage that I put. Like, we have to grow a set. You got to find your fucking backbone, come back to the middle, stop worrying about the extremes because they're the ones with all the fucking airtime, and just say, look, in the middle is where 80-90% of us agree. 80-90% of the community is going to be able to interact, and we're going to celebrate the differences. But if we stay on these extreme razor edges that we have arguably for several years now, it's going to end in a horrible way. And you're letting these people back to the money. All they want is your money. They don't give a flying fuck about you. So pulling people together, divide and conquer, as they say, bringing us back, united we stand. I think there really is going to be a resurgence of community, kindness, and compassion. I really do. But we have to have the courage to actually want it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And part of it too, I mean, depending on how exposed that we want to go, because, children get exploited every day. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of children that go missing, and, they're involved in trafficking and the pedophilia, and there's so much horrific things going on in the world that if we really stop to consider, I mean, what they promote as an ideal and what they put on TV, and yet every single day, we don't even know half the things that are going on, and people can go, what a shitty world that we live in. Unfortunately, if yin and yang are the polar opposites, then everything exists equally. And so I've got more at peace with myself than getting angry or getting frustrated when what is it that I want to do? What is it that I want to see? Because we can be upset and offended by what's going on in the world, and we want to make changes, and we send money. But have you gone around the corner? Have you seen that homeless guy? Have you given him any food? Are you supporting your community? Do you see the struggles in your own street? We're not concerned about those people around us, and we get offended and get upset about what's going on in other countries when we're only getting that information via the media, which we well know can be heavily tainted and influenced by the money and the propaganda and people, through their own means. So, I mean, when we just start to see that there's a lot of struggles at home, I mean, the problems with the governance and the financial, I mean, we're having an election here at the moment. The government takes, every time we vote, every individual vote is worth $3.38. It's a money-making scheme. And so if you start calling out some of these things, if you start recognizing where the problems lie, how quickly you can be silenced and censored and subverted. And so we're only going to see and hear things that are suiting somebody else's agenda. And it's really tough this day and age to be a leader, because we'll see it, go back to those days. It's like, all right, does anyone here want to be a leader? Oh, I want to be a leader. All right. Anyone else want to be a leader? So it's very easy sometimes to silence the masses when they see what happens to good people who stand up and want to be accounted for. And they'll all go, this will be interesting to see what happens now. So there's a real sense of fear. There's a real sense that sometimes we're being suppressed. And that just didn't happen overnight. That's been happening for a very, very long time. And so when does it start? How does this change come about? And each person has their own responsibility to lead their own culture and be a good parent and be a good friend and be a good lover and be good to themselves. Let's start with our own mental health. Can we be kind and loving to ourselves? Because I know so many people who are incredible people that don't like themselves, that don't like their lives, and yet they're loving, but they're not lovable. And that's a real sadness in the world, that people don't know how supported and loved they are. So they go out there and try to get some sense of inclusion by giving it all away, and they have nothing for themselves. Now that's a challenge, and I don't know how that's supposed to change and where that spiritual bereft is. But faith has been subverted. That becomes this religious. I'm not against religion. If you find something in your life, a deity or a supreme being, that makes you feel better about yourself, have at it. But don't tell me, show me. Show me what that level of love and kindness does for you. But if you're going to exclude, if you're going to be prejudiced against somebody because they don't believe in what you believe in, I don't see that that's a kindness when you're excluding people from your belief systems. We are all equal, supposedly, in the eyes of this creative influence, which I see when I directly influenced, when I relate to it, it gives me back what I put into it. All the stuff, right? Not just the good stuff, but the hidden stuff. And that's why I think it's important that we do the self-work, we do the shadow work. This toxic masculinity is a weakness because they're not willing to look at the parts of themselves that aren't showing up. So when I tell you how good I am, if you want to be like me, look like me, act like me, take what I take, and I'm selling this ideal, okay, let's turn the camera off and let's have a real conversation. Then we know. Right? Now we've got this exposure behind the scenes, right? You're talking about behind the shield. We see this ideal, we see the virtues of what this kind of value means, but are we giving them 100% to succeed, or are we hamstringing them from the start? And I've seen, and I totally wholeheartedly, the sleep deprivation, the pressures, you expect these people to operate like robots. They can't. I mean, Movie World, when they got rid of the Western show, they realized that the horses couldn't work 7 days a week. They needed a break. Oh, what? You mean we can't flog these things to death? These beasts aren't at our own disposal? No. Now, even these animals have a standard, and you'll break them if you don't look after them. All right, well, we're not going to pay more money for that. We'll just exploit people. People don't say anything. At least animals will rebel. You can't force a dog or a cat or a horse to do something they don't want to do. You try it. Nature has its own strength, and we're messing with that. That's where that nature nurture kind of value has to be in an alignment.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're going to kind of round off the conversation on that truth bomb. I want to go to some closing questions quickly. The first one I love to ask: are there books that you love to recommend? It can be related to our discussion today or completely unrelated.
Oh, I mentioned those two at the start. I think they're great initial. If people are looking to find something more, I love The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I love some of his stories. I've got a book called The Manual of the Warrior of Light, and so my email is John Warrior of Light, because it talks about that the warrior of light will continue to walk his path even through the challenges. He will fall, he will cry, he will pick himself up, he will carry on his journey. So it's kind of like my little Bible, I guess. I flick it, just open, just read some of that stuff. That's amazing for me. I love stuff by Dan Millman. I probably don't read as much as I used to. I like the field of influenced by watching conversations and the psychology. But yeah, I mean, there's some great people who like to share, and I guess now the medium is talking. So I can't really say apart from those ones I highlighted, they were very influential. Anything by Stuart Wilde. He wrote a book called The Force, which was kind of like waking me up to an unseen, untapped. I mean, it's like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. We can't see it, but without it, we don't operate. We can't connect with one another. So this unseen field of connection that we're all tapped into, and how we charge ourselves, how we influence ourselves, how we regulate, maintain this holistic battery that we are, comes from the information that we are consuming. So I just feel like if people are attracted, books show up at a perfect time. Good conversations show up. People show up. We're attracted to ourselves. Hey, investigate that. If it seems something, influential, have a look at it, try it, and then then use it. Take it on board for yourself. There's no information that anyone has that's theirs. Nobody owns that.
Absolutely. What about films and documentaries?
Gosh, yeah. I'm a real eclectic. It's like my music collection, that there's something for everyone. Yeah, I mean, I look at from the bodybuilding world, from the spiritual world. I look at all the different ologies. I look at the ideals of flat Earth. I look at the ideals of inner Earth. I look at the ideals of reptilians or ancient aliens, and all the outside with the firmament and the Antarctic. The ice walls and birds trip into the behind over the ice wall. I mean, there is so much amazing information which can be distractive, but I also think it's very engaging when you start to look at how long have we been here for, right? I'm always curious to see who's promoting a consciousness that's eternal, rather than there's a great show on Prime at the moment called The Man in the High Castle, around the ideals that the Germans won the war and what happened, and then he's filmed this interdimensional sense that timelines what is real. Do we live in a simulated reality? And this is when you start to people go, oh my God, he's one of those people. It's like, yeah, I'm not promoting it. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm saying if somebody tells you this is the truth and this is all there is, no. Right? Because there's no, the truth is just the lies that we all agree upon, right? Facts are just based on somebody else's desire of that. And so things have changed. And I just love the fact that there's so much awareness now. I mean, apparently this year, we've really opened up the floodgates. I mean, the CIA released, 80,000 pages on, hey, tell us about aliens. Tell us about aliens. All right, here's the alien stuff. Oh, tell us about this. We're asking for something we don't want, and then we get it, and we're like, oh, I don't want that anymore because you're giving it to me. So what's left? What's left, I think, is the fact that there's nothing more to learn. We need to unlearn. We need to strip back all of the lies and the deceits and the cover-ups and get back to core purpose, the blueprint, the soul's purpose for being here. We're so subverted from that. And I think when people recognize that inner intuition, anything that can help somebody find their truth and live it with all of their ideals and love, man, we're going to see some changes in the world. And I think there's a scramble to keep pushing that down. But man, when those floodgates open, that day will be a good day, or a month or a year. I mean, it's like molasses, isn't it? It's a slow trickle. It doesn't happen overnight, and both ways.
I've said this
long answer to a short question.
No, it's good. That was a great answer. Yeah, I've said this recently. I really feel that when you reflect, we talk about evolution being technology, the wheel, fire, the industrial revolution, the computer. But really, if you look back at the true evolution of mankind, it's kindness and compassion. We were brutal back in the day, in the Dark Ages. Again, if you believe history is, what we were told. But I feel like that's where this awakening comes. Who has regressed us? It's the Hitlers. It's the, insert whatever tyrant from the UK, from the US, and all the other places around the world that have kept people fat and sick, or they've got them into wars, or whatever the thing is. And when we realize that we are supposed to be kinder, we are supposed to be more compassionate. And I feel like then the nations that get it first become a beacon of light. And you could argue that Scandinavia and some other places are already there, and now then you're able to help other nations that are at each other's throats start to de-escalate, because sending troops in clearly isn't the answer when we've learned that from, centuries of war. But I feel like you're absolutely right. There are certain powers that be that I would argue are basically hurt people that never had the courage to look in the mirror and fix themselves, that are hell-bent on carrying on this tyranny and this conflict and this division. So I really feel like we have a renaissance coming where there is going to be this awakening, and that is going to ultimately carry into actually, what's the right word? De-escalating conflicts all over the world, starting again, like you said, from your home, then your community, then your county, then your country, and then ultimately, it penetrates other parts in the world that are struggling more. So I think the way that we do fix so many things is understand that at our core, and so many of these holy books, so many of these, Roman and Greek texts and all the other, wisdom that's carried on for millennia, they all said the same thing: don't be a fucking dick. That's it. So when we start learning that, I think there is going to be an amazing renaissance of compassion.
It's yeah, it's interesting to think if you look back through history, and if we, Tesla was trying to bring back free energy. Supposedly we had access to the ether, and there was, the pyramids were machines, and they're all over the world, and so the suppression of information that we don't get what we're looking for. I mean, I keep asking all these questions, and I see these ideals, but there's nowhere to go. And unless you're going to become a real fanatic, and you're going to spend money and time and do that sort of stuff. I mean, there's a guy called Michael Tellinger in South Africa, and he's found all of these interconnected sort of spirals that are all over that place, and they're all in alignment. It's all the pyramids line up with Orion's belt, and so how did all these ancient civilizations have this knowledge that we today, when we say, look what we've done, aren't we amazing? Well, no, because we've got stuff in the past you can't do today, and you're lying about what it was, and that stuff gets suppressed. And so I start to realize, how long have we been in this experience and what we're doing? And we're not the only hominids that have been here. I mean, we're not the only bipedal civilizations, and are we all the same? I mean, they keep telling us of our DNA, 6% is good and 94% is junk DNA. Well, hang on. You're telling me that 94% of my physiology, you just throw that stuff away? I mean, there's so much in that. And the caduce, you know what I mean, through the snake and all of these mythologies that we kind of use for subversion and light and dark and left and right and sense of diversity. I mean, you talk about a device. I mean, the phone is a device, but it's divisive. We talk about the vices that we have, and what does a vice do but hold you, in that process. So, I mean, alcohol is a vice, and the tobacco industry, but tobacco's been around for thousands of years, but it's what they do to it. And seemingly we have beautiful things in this world, incredible experiences that get tainted and get used for control methods. And you talk about this power and control. The richest countries in the world, the richest people in the world, what are they doing? How are they supporting? They've just donated $15 million or $15 billion to charity. Yeah, their own charity, for tax write-offs. So, how come we're seeing so much of this increase in money? When you and I were growing up, being a millionaire, right? The $6 million man. Well, oh my God, $6 million. Well, $6 million gets you a hip replacement and a an ear plug or something, for hearing better. I mean, you'd be the $6 billion man now, right? So, I mean, how come so much money has become so prevalent? We're in the trillions now. And what changed? How come, the cryptocurrencies and the money's changing, and it's very distorting when you start to realize. I mean, my mum's 82 now, and talking to her about her experiences, and I remember talking to my grandfather, and he made it to 97. And I mean, everybody's looking at that next generation going, oh, in my day, it's like, so, man, I don't think we've ever seen or heard of a day like this, of these consistencies, of how much that things are just throwing caution to the wind. And like, for me personally, what I'd like to see, like to talk about these kindnesses that we have. I haven't met anybody that didn't respond well to kindness. And yet that's not something we see from the top down. And when we get it, it's like, oh my gosh, it's a surprise when we see it. And it's one of our inherent ideals within our bodies and our sense. So when did we become so selfish? When the ideas of, when you're a kid, don't be self-centered. Well, where else are you going to be? unless you're centered in the self. Selfish, ish belonging to, pertaining to the ideal self. So the ideals of selfishness is inherent. Everybody needs to be selfish. But why? Like, what's the purpose? Me, or us and we? And we have seen it change. And again, we're now at a point where it's like, yep, so, big deal. So what? Now what? But if each individual person takes accountability, takes responsibility, but they don't have enough money, they don't have enough time, they don't have enough courage. So who's promoting that? When was the last time I've seen the billboard driving down the street? Be kind and loving to one another. Smile, right? Do something kind for someone. Don't speed. Insurance, pharmaceutical, right? If advertising works, it's on buses, it's on cabs, it breaks into your podcast, it breaks into everything. It must work. That's subliminal. That's influential, that there's coding, there's symbology in there, and we've forgotten what our symbols mean anymore, right? You've got that octagon, right? And when you look at what the octagon is, it's about the 8-sided figure of influence and birth and death. What has it got on it? Stop. So the sacred geometry is damaged because it tells you to stop. And what does it give way as a triangle? Triangle is a very powerful symbol, right? The 3, the aspect, what does it say? Give way, stop, give, stop, right? All the time we're driving down the street, being indoctrinated, being influenced unconsciously because we've forgotten who our ancient teachers were of math, of formulas, the Fibonacci, the golden ratio, right? If coding is 001100, these figures become so influential. Coding from a computer is the coding of our own life. And so if we don't even recognize what the coding is, we don't have any ability to deal with it. So that's hidden. It's the hidden aspects of getting back to truth. So who starts that? And if all of a sudden somebody starts being loud enough and being popular enough, how long before they're arrested or manipulated or called out for something they've done, and we've got the goods on you? And it's scary. Now, how big do you want to be? How powerful do you think you're going to get before somebody's going to take notice and you'll be in the book? And it's scary to think, oh, well, I only want to do enough so that I'm successful in my own life. Okay. Good luck.
Yep.
But it starts. Here we are, right? I'm talking about it. You're talking about it. More power to the people. We have the power.
Well, I think that, really, to me, when I think about it, when people say how big do you want to get? It's like, I don't. That's the point. You want to be behind the shield. You want to be feeding ideas. You want to be sowing seeds where people don't even realize that, like you said, in a positive way, they don't realize they're being influenced to actually be more brave and to have more conversations and to have hope that they can lose the weight, have hope that they can start dealing with some of the trauma that they buried down. I think that's just it. You don't have to try and be the man on the podium. You can actually, with this technology now that we've got, you can do it very, subversively, where people don't even realize that there's someone, really doing it. And then even with the firefighter work week, like, it's happening here. And it's not like I'm, front and center being, I am no, not at all. This is a combination of a bunch of people that are realizing this is the right way. But has, my voice been a part of that? Absolutely it has. Do I want any credit for it? No, not at all. I just want people to get better and, not bury firefighters anymore. So I think that's the thing, is when you take the ego out and you just want to, as you said, get yourself better, get your household better, and then help your community. If we all do that, all of a sudden we're part of a mosaic and there is no tall poppy. We're all part of this movement then.
Yeah. And look, I love what you're doing. I really commend, having met you, what would I think about the other day? What's that, 24 years ago?
Yes.
And the journey some people have taken and some people have picked up the mantle. And again, it's not for everyone, but for those who I saw had something of an attractive quality, that there was a steely discipline, a disposition, that they were unwavered and they were willing to make the difference. and shine a light on what they themselves. And I see, for me, I'm working within my framework because I didn't have the confidence, I didn't have the courage, I didn't have the fortitude. And so now that I've found that and developed that, and I put it out there, and then I see the benefits, and then that's for me is a win. It's a win-win. That it's not indulgent because I'm giving it away to get it back again. It's a cycle, isn't it? And so I commend you and thank you for the role that you've stepped up into. Because if not, then who are we waiting for? Who's coming to save the world, or and not saying, but your world, my world, my inner world is all I can work on, and that's more real than everything else out here.
Yeah,
that's where I'm going to be happy.
Beautiful. All right. Well, one of the last questions before I let you go, is there a person that you'd recommend to come on this podcast as a guest?
Wow. I mean, I thank you for having me on the guest. I certainly don't necessarily meet the criteria. But man, you're very diverse now. You kind of cover off. I'm aware, with my I'm very, very new into the piece, but I like the idea of the masculine and the feminine. So it'd be interesting to maybe talk to some of the stunt women, or stunt coordinators now. I mean, women are stepping in as safety and coordinators, and what's that like as a journey to overcome some of these stigmas of that's a masculine job. Well, no, we're seeing now that there's a lot more of the feminine stepping in to lead, which is a beautiful thing to see. I think women have this incredible strength and graceful quality when they use that for the greater good.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one. I think it's Katie. I forget her last name though, but she's a phenomenal skydiver. Squirrel suit, all that whole area. I think, and base jumping. But I blanked on her name because we were going to do it a while ago, and then she had a gig, so I've got to circle around and get her on. But yeah, there is someone literally that's on deck. A couple actually. There's another one who Kimberly, I think her first name is, and she's just written a book on her own mental health, if I remember rightly. So, but she's in the stunt world too. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. All right. Well, then the last question before we make sure everyone knows where to find you, what do you do to decompress?
I still like to train. I still like the physicality. I mean, you talk about the ideals of exercise, and even in the religious context, if we exercise the demons, right? So exercise has a way of bringing up dopamine and serotonin, oxytocin, and releasing things out of my body. So training's a big one. The breathing, just taking time to just sit in my body, through yoga or stretching, and eating well. I really feel like that side of things, of making sure that I'm fueling myself. So I like the virtues of coffee. I wake up every day and make my organic coffee with my mushroom powder in it, and things like that. So I like setting the tone. I think it's important of set and setting, that I just look at making sure that how am I feeling today, and then what am I going to do with that feeling for the rest of the day? How can I contribute? So a lot of it's the visualization. I'm a very visual person. I see it, and that's been a good way for me to kind of see the world I want to have. When we project into that experience.
So if people want to find the channel, or if they want to find you on social media, online, where are the best places?
So the company is Strong, Happy, Healthy, Loved. So if you go to shhl.com.au, that's the channel. So I've started doing some little segment called Food for Thought, which is just the ideals we've talked about today, changing the paradigm, having conversations with people about their mental health and the relativity. And otherwise on social media, it's John Reynolds. Yeah. So that's the simplicity of it.
Perfect. Well, mate, I want to say thank you so much. It's been so bizarre. I literally don't think that we've spoken since you left Kaigandori. I'm assuming it was because I was there for 3 more months, and here we are now, having this conversation. It was the same with Steve. We'd spoken a little bit, and then same with Captain Dai too. So I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and so courageously vulnerable. Kind of bearing your soul on the show today and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast.
No, I really appreciate the invitation, and like I said, so inspired and proud of what you're doing. That you've set the tone for me. So I love the fact that I can just have a footprint to play with, and I like the fact that if we're going to be truthful, if we're going to be honest, then I need to strip back the layers and show that I can't hide, or people will see that too. So that's the courage to be vulnerable, to be authentic. So I appreciate you and your time as well.